Thoughts on Strickland's response when confronted with his anti-LGBTQ plus comments, specifically his comments on if he had a gay son, coming right on the heels of a podcast appearance where he complained he wasn't loved enough as a child. This person writes, I've appreciated my takes on Strickland. Okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing that what a week, right? Okay, so there actually are parts of this story that I do find worth discussing for the benefit of everyone, of every type of persuasion, I think, that are actually, to me, the parts of this story that are worth discussing. And then there are parts that are not. Let me tell you about the parts that are not, and then you can make a decision about how you want to feel about that totally on your own. What we're not going to do, what I just cannot bring myself to do, I am not going to debate the humanity of a gay child. I'm not going to debate the ethics of whether, or the responsibility of whether or not a dad should love their gay child or something, whether they have deserving of their father's love. I would hope that most of you would understand that is so insanely stupid that it is like self-evidently not. You only need a very basic amount of moral reasoning to come to some kind of understanding there, and I don't think our time is best served exploring those questions. I'm trying to be as friendly about this as I can, and I hope folks can understand that. These are basic moral questions to get right, and I don't feel like I say this, and I know I didn't understand this when I was 24, so I can in no way be mad at anybody else. But you should really think about, from the moment your eyes open in the morning to the moment they close when you go to bed, that's a finite amount of attention you have to expose yourself to something in the world. And you only get a finite amount of those in your life. And by the way, those might end sooner than you think. So I really believe people don't take enough care to think about what they spend their time consuming, what they spend their time paying attention to, and what their attention is occupied by during the course of a day, a week, a month, a year, or frankly, even a lifetime. These are precious commodities that we should exercise much more discretion over to get better sources of information, entertainment, boredom, whatever. But whatever is occupying our attention should carry some measure of worth and contribution to yourself. And if it's not, there's some rethinking about what's happening here. Those are conversations that I think would, how do I say this? You're welcome to those conversations. They're going to happen among people who have an insanely metastasized worldview, and you're not really going to get a very helpful conversation out of it. So I don't really believe that that's going to be an effective use of our time. And I'm really, it's so matter-of-factly stupid. I can't believe it that this is a fucking headline that we have to, so what was the news in MMA this week? Well, funny you should ask. Do gay kids deserve the love of their parents? It's like, okay, what year is this? 1936? All right. I do think there's something a little bit more interesting about the story itself, or what some of the different pieces you can pick up from there. Namely, in reference to the particular comment that you made, which one was about, about his, I think it was like, you'd feel like a failure as a father if you had a gay child, or something to that effect that he had said. And, it's kind of interesting. It appears to me that he has an inability to distinguish between parental love or care as separate from coddling. He does not have the ability to distinguish the two. He actually it appears that he views all, or virtually most forms of what actually would be quite normal parent to child care, love, interaction, socialization. He appears to view that as inherently coddling. I mean, I didn't get to it last week, or whatever it was, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, where we were talking about some of the things that, like, obviously, when he broke down on the Theo Von podcast and like what that sort of told you. One thing that we did not get to is there can be a certain mentality from people who make it through experiences in the way that he made it through. Again, this is hardly to have sympathy for his worldview, but rather to understand why he is so adamant about, or how he arrived at some of these frankly contradictory positions. But sometimes a person like that can go through an experience and, frankly, I mean, I'm using the words like correctly. It's like survive it, like straight up survive it. And they have to harden themselves, and they have to deal with all manner of unfairness and difficulty and anxiety and strain and trauma and everything else that goes along with it. And so it warps their ability to distinguish between love and coddling, because any form of it, or most forms of it, were denied them, or not properly given to them, and they had to steel themselves in some kind of a way in order to get through that process, which they see as, oh, right, look what I got through this. Look what I had to do to get through this. Clearly, these are sources of strength. Coping mechanisms can be helpful in the short run, but they're not necessarily sources of strength. In fact, they can ultimately be long-term sources of weakness, right? If you've gotten to the point where it appears like under circumstances of if you got to the point where you can't really understand, just connect the dots on this one, folks, here a little bit, right? Like, you just have a guy who was deeply traumatized growing up, which is, of course, an abhorrent horror. Wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy if you're at all a caring person. And he had to survive it, and it completely it altered him in a way that I don't think is irreversible, but you get what you get. And part of that is when you have this kind of survivor mentality, is you think that those things that hardened you are actually what make you better than everybody else. And in fact, it's what has warped you the other way. Yes, they probably did help for that circumstance, but you should have never been put in that circumstance to forgive with. And so you've developed all of these skills relative to trauma that have nothing to do with the rest of broader society or normal interaction. It appears to be that there's some of that going on, which I think is part of it. I also was kind of paying attention to some of the reaction around it, and like who was saying what about it. And of course, again, you can like these, you can hate these. I'm just trying to call it. You may say I got it right, you may say I got it wrong. I'm just trying to call it the best way that I can call it. Like what the reactions were. There was a heavy embrace from what I could see on social media from obviously much more conservative or right-leaning outlets about Sean's message. And I think some of the things that I saw were like, they liked that he was so outspoken. They either agreed with the message outright. There was support of not backing down to anybody, or, perceived constraints on speech or something like that, especially since he was in technically a foreign country. And then there was a equal backlash on, I think, media that speaks more to left-leaning people about, obviously, what is ESPN doing? Where is UFC in all of this? What does UFC actually think of all of this? My understanding is they don't love it at all, but I don't really know what that's supposed to mean. And so there was this really very polar reaction, but the biggest reaction in terms of the size of the audience came from the conservative side. I saw one place that had tens of thousands of retweets from one of the videos, a real total embrace. I think this sort of tells you that, we kind of already knew this, right? But MMA is firmly a right-wing sport, right? And again, you can like that or you can hate that. I'm just trying to make a judgment call as best I can about what the actual truth is. It's firmly a right-wing sport. And so folks have asked me previously, what is that going to mean for the audience? And again, I don't really know what it does to the popularity. UFC is pretty goddamn popular, and perhaps recruiting these audiences actually grows its numbers over time. I think that question we shall see. They're certainly not suffering in any kind of way. And we've said before, PFL ain't going to do shit to compete with them. But it definitely is going to homogenize the audience, right? These are the sort of events that are going to clearly make people who are not in agreement, or upset many kinds of people who are not in agreement with what Sean is doing or saying, or the UFC's inability or unwillingness to do anything about it. It's going to be majorly off-putting for them. So there's definitely, these are the kind of events that create homogeneity, such as that is a good or bad thing as well. I will say I'm a little bit surprised at some of the reaction I've seen in terms of why people are bitter about it. Here's the thing, right? If you're celebrating Sean's willingness, for example, it's a question of hey, he's got a right to express himself like anybody else does. That's true. That's absolutely true. I don't really, you don't hear me calling for him to be stripped or fined or anything like that. That's not, taking him off the card or some shit. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just having a conversation. So if we're, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, I mean, I'm not sure really what else there is to say about it. I don't think. Yeah, this is what I mean. Yeah, sort of getting back to it all a little bit here. Um, these are the interesting moments to reflect upon for what it both tells you about the nature of the fan base, how it's changed over the last 10 years. I do think it has. What it might look like in 5 to 10. What are some of the factors that got us to this part? I'm going to guess, you know, I think that I don't have much evidence for this claim, so I'll probably keep that part to myself. But yeah, but you know, I mean, getting up here and being like, geez, geez, do gay kids deserve the love of their parents? I mean, listen, when my kid was born, I wished for two things. One, or yeah, and I thought they were pretty simple, but they're pretty big too. Pretty big. I wished for her to be healthy, you know, and happy. That's it. That's all. And if you ask me what I want for her life, that is it. The rest of the details are what fate awaits me and what she can carve out for herself and what I can help her build. That's it. I think asking for anything more than that is honestly like sort of cosmically greedy. And you're sort of missing the plot. I mean, if you have your health, truly you have your health. And if you have your happiness, truly, like you're really happy deep down, you don't need anything else. You're good. Like there's nothing that's you can externally need for validation in that way. Like you're living what I think each day that you're healthy and happy. This is basically what like great life consists of. And I have found happiness, I don't know about you guys, I have found happiness to be very difficult over time to achieve. I've had moments, certainly, had eras, had years, had whatever. But it's been difficult. And I would say that, I think that is, you're asking like what I would want for my child, or frankly any child. I think that is where it's not even so much a nobility. I think it's the fair thing to ask for any kid in any kind of circumstance. And you know, for someone who has been robbed of the ability to get a normal parenting experience, he seems awfully keen to pass that trauma along, versus taking a look back and thinking maybe the way it happened for me was the way it should not have happened for me. And he's learned a series of behaviors that and lessons from life that steeled him for the tumult of that experience that don't really help him at all for anything else outside of it. Also, the last thing I thought was kind of interesting was like getting to the point like whether you can like respond to this stuff. It's like, guys, I mean, can we just stop the pretension? Like everybody gets mad about one thing or the other. Like pretending that there's one side that just doesn't get mad about things. I mean, guys, y'all's dude Kid Rock was shooting up a Bud Light with a fucking AR-15. I mean, that's the most mad man I've ever seen online. You know, people get mad about shit. Like whatever, people get mad. You know, everyone has a right to express their worldview, including people who are also not fans of what Sean has said. Right? I mean, why is that off limits? Why is it like the bold declaration of what is perceived to be brave and otherwise interesting truth, which of course it is neither of those things, but why is that like the sanctity of that should be protected in the silence of people who disagree, but the reverse is not true? I mean, this is silly. Like, of course, yes, he does have a right to express himself 1,000,000,000%. He's an independent contractor. He can say what he wants. But people have a right to say things about it, both again, positively or negatively. And the pushback on people being like not happy with it, like this is some kind of affront to everyone else. I don't quite get that. But you know, I also don't have, yeah, I'll leave it at that. So I don't really have much to say about it. I think that this is kind of a whole embarrassing episode for MMA. I bet you that UFC feels the exact same way, even though they're not going to do shit about it. But if you're having a week, let me just tell you flat out, if you're having a week where there's a question about, you know, one of your athletes is, you know, there's a suggestion that a gay child who has a father, like whether or not they merit their love, boy, you are in a terrible place. Terrible. You have fucked the whole shit up at that point, you know. But that's where we are. That's where we are. All right. And I don't know what that means for all of like what is. I mean, was this going to be a distraction heading into Saturday? Does he like doing this shit? Does he not like doing this shit? I don't know. People being like, oh, last thing on this. The last thing I'll say, which is I saw people being like, well, answer his points, but like he didn't make any arguments. I mean, this is the whole thing that comes down to. It's like, dude, I went to high school in the fucking 90s. Like, I lived through the entire world adjudicating these questions. And I know people think that there are new factors in play that change it. They don't. Uh, like, it's so bizarre to me. Like, this is what I mean when like people criticize American politics for being so fucking stupid. It's like, this is what I mean. It's like, there's actually like gigantic problems that are going largely unaddressed that affect all broad swaths of people like you and me. And this is the dumb shit we're focused on. Questions that we litigated in the fucking 90s? Seriously? I'm 44. We've been discussing this bullshit since I was 16. Move on. Move the fuck on. But, you know, people think it's rational when it's just fucking quite obviously a reactionary force. And, you know, I know there's going to be a bunch of people who are upset about this and they're going to downvote the video and they're going to say a bunch of mean things about me because, you know, they've been they don't realize that this is an this is an election year and this is the kind of thing that the dog gets wagged to coalesce the evangelical, in other words, otherwise conservative support around election cycles. Like, I mean, none of this is an authentic personality. It's a consequence of I think the world in which we live today. But just been like a lot of weird parts about it, aside from just the horror of the worldview expressed itself. Yeah. I genuinely feel bad for people in the industry who are gay. I don't know how they do it, to be honest with you. Like, would you want to be a part of the industry if you loved MMA? Like, or imagine you're already in it and this is the kind of shit that's going on. Like, people think, oh, I love that he said the brave thing, which is what they imagine. It's like, well, no, you just love the idea. Like, you're supporting the idea itself and all the ramifications therein. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm so glad he expressed his First Amendment rights. That's really not what the joy is here. The joy is the presentation of the worldview. Just be honest about that.